If you've also struggled fighting Radahn in Elden Ring or felt frustrated by losing to Malenia countless times,
I am Malenia, Blade of Mikola.
Yeah, I know.
then you will feel right at home in Dark Souls 3. The guy you are looking at on your screen right now is the Nameless King, a boss so legendary that he takes the crown for one of the hardest and most iconic boss battles in From Software's history. His compelling backstory, his soundtrack, his attacks and his moveset all come together to create a hell of an experience for a boss battle. This boss alone is reason enough to pick up the controller and play Dark Souls 3 right now. And we will talk about him more later in the video, though trust me, there are plenty of other reasons too to start playing the Dark Souls franchise. The release of Elden Ring brought a massive wave of new players to From Software's catalog of different games. Due to the curiosity and hunger for playing more games like Elden Ring, there are 3 games which have found themselves back in the spotlight. And these 3 games are Bloodborne, Dark Souls and Sekiro. Personally, for me the situation is a little bit different. I began my From Software journey in 2019 when I picked up Sekiro and instantly got hooked to the fast-paced combat, the difficulty and the gameplay style that the game offered. Without any doubt, Sekiro became my game of the year and naturally, I wanted more of it. So, I picked up Dark Souls. Unfortunately, Dark Souls 1 did not click with me. Coming off from Sekiro, the slower and more precise combat of Dark Souls 1 felt way too different, and I walked away from the game thinking that maybe Dark Souls just wasn't for me. After dropping Dark Souls 1, I decided to give Bloodborne a try, and then something changed. I finally began to understand the appeal of the Soulsborne formula. It was less about speed like it is in Sekiro and more about the patience, the timing and reading your enemy. The challenge that Bloodborne offered hooked me and I fell completely in love with the dark, immersive atmosphere of the game. Then, when Elden Ring dropped, it took everything I loved about Bloodborne and expanded it into an awe-inspiring open world. After that, I knew I had to give Dark Souls another shot. But this time, I picked up Dark Souls 3 instead of going back to the original, and let me tell you, I am so glad I decided to give Dark Souls another chance because it has now become one of my favorite games of all time. One of the most unforgettable parts of Dark Souls 3 is the boss battles. This is something that we have to talk about. If you played any From Software game, you already know they don't hold back when it comes to creating epic, intense boss fight experiences. But Dark Souls 3, it takes things to a whole new level. I will never forget the first time I walked into the arena of the Abyss Watchers. That intense feeling is something I hadn't quite experienced in Elden Ring, where bosses tend to have a larger, more isolated arenas. Then there is Pontiff Sulyvahn, a boss that feels almost like a precursor to the fast and aggressive combat I loved in Sekiro. His twin sword attacks had me dodging and parrying like I was back to playing Sekiro again, but in contrast to Sekiro's deflection focused mechanics, where every sword clash feels very precise, in Dark Souls 3 there is a weight to every single hit, a sense that each mistake could be your last. Sulyvahn was a reminder that in Dark Souls it is not just about the aggression but also about the timing and survival. Dark Souls has a number of great bosses, no doubt, but all of them pales in comparison to one specific boss, the Nameless King. Just like Malenia, Nameless King is a completely optional boss in Dark Souls 3, and it takes some effort to even reach him in the first place. After fighting through an entire area and finally reaching the top peak, the Nameless King appears. He doesn't walk into the arena, he enters while riding a dragon, and right from the start, you realize that this isn't just some another boss fight. This one is going to be different. After losing to him some 4, 5, 50 times, you finally get the hang of his moveset and defeat him. Then, the Nameless King dismounts his dragon and you realize it is time for phase 2. The sheer aura that you see emanating from this guy is in itself terrifying, and it makes you realize that this is a From Software moment. This is the kind of legendary fight and a legendary boss that you and other people will talk about even years from now. In comparison, bosses like Radahn and Malenia in Elden Ring are equally epic, but they're epic in different ways. Radahn is like a god of destruction with insanely powerful attacks that could beat you in a single hit, while Malenia, on the other hand, is a test of your endurance and your dodging skills. But the Nameless King isn't like that. There is a narrative weight to him. The environment and the world around him not only respects him, but fears him, and you feel that every second you are in his presence. Sekiro bosses, by contrast, are like duels where precision and timing are key to winning against your enemies. The Nameless King, though, is pure, raw power. You're not outsmarting him, you are surviving him. And that's why Dark Souls 3 bosses stand apart. They're not just hard, they are grand. Each fight feels like the culmination of something greater, where every victory comes with a sense of earned accomplishment. If you thought the bosses in Elden Ring and Sekiro were fun, then trust me, you are in for a whole new level of challenge with Dark Souls 3. If you are someone coming off from playing Elden Ring, you might be wondering, why go back and play Dark Souls 3 at all? After all, Elden Ring is newer, bigger, and has so many more amazing features. But trust me, if you loved Elden Ring, there is so much in Dark Souls 3 that you will appreciate and maybe even prefer. In terms of gameplay, Elden Ring's combat is incredible because of the sheer variety of weapons, builds, and playstyle that it offers. But what if I told you Dark Souls 3 hones that same experience into something even more refined? The pacing of the fights in Dark Souls 3 is tighter, and because the game is more linear, each boss fight feels like a milestone, like you are making your way through this series of escalating challenges. In Elden Ring, you can wander off, level up, or find a much powerful weapon and come back to a particular boss later after fighting the other bosses. But in Dark Souls 3, you are pushed to face every challenge head on, which makes each victory feel that much more rewarding. From a gameplay standpoint, this could be a positive or a negative depending on your perspective, but ultimately Dark Souls 3 offers something that Elden Ring players will find familiar, but in a more focused and refined way. It is not about the massive open world exploration, it is about the precision, challenge, and immersion that Dark Souls 3 offers. If you loved Elden Ring, then you owe it to yourself to try Dark Souls 3. And trust me, by the time you face the Nameless King, you'll see why. So, after everything I've shared, I hope you can see why Dark Souls 3 is more than just another entry in the From Software catalog. Whether it is the unforgettable boss battles, or the tightly refined combat system, or the carefully designed world, Dark Souls 3 brings a level of challenge and immersion that will resonate with both new and veteran players alike. If you've loved Elden Ring for its huge open world and epic scale, then Dark Souls 3 offers something equally rewarding, but in a more focused manner. Every fight in Dark Souls 3 is a milestone, every victory feels hard-earned, and facing the Nameless King alone is an experience that you cannot miss. So, if you played Dark Souls 3, then do you agree with me or do you have different thoughts? Drop your answer in the comments below, I'd love to hear about your experiences. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more gaming content, and hit the notification bell so you will never miss an upload. I've got plenty more things to share, and now I will also pick up Dark Souls 1 again, but this time I will see it through until the end. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.